Hi, and welcome back to Broken and Brilliant. I'm here again with Forrest Lien, who is the director of the Institute for Attachment here in Denver. Thank you for coming back again, Forrest.
Sure.
Well, last time we talked about what is reactive attachment disorder and what are the symptoms and what happens in ages 1, 2, and 3 in a child's life that actually disorders their attachment and causes this sense of this need for control that seriously feels like this child is going to die if they don't gain the control in their situations. So let's talk today a little bit about what can a parent do if they're hearing this and they're going, my goodness, I think this is my kid. Where do they start? What can they do? What's out there for them?
Well, there's lots of information, of course, on the internet, but you have to be careful about that too, because there's some people on the internet that just don't believe in the disorder, so they badmouth it and discredit people all the time. So it gets confusing for a parent. They're looking for help, and then they get confused as they're doing their search. So that's a tough one. I wish it wasn't that tough.
Right. Well, when we were going through it, I did have an attachment specialist that I feel helped us very much, but he was quite a ways away. And it was a long drive back and forth every time. So after about 4 years, I tried to find somebody here closer. Wish I would have found you. But what I found was a lot of times people would say that they understood attachment and, oh yeah, I get that. And probably because they had a class in college that touched on attachment theory or something. But I would go and end up spending my money, an entire hour session, basically educating the clinician on what I was living with. And it's like, well, I'm paying you to tell you what I'm living with. And they didn't even understand it. So it was very, very frustrating. Yeah. It's hard for parents.
Well, and I think that, when people call me, I can make a connection with what they're talking about. I think that is the most important. So when you're talking to a therapist about what you're living in and the symptoms, that they are able to understand and grasp it. If you feel like they're telling you stuff or saying, well, that's not true or that has not worked, I would move on.
Well, I remember at one point we had our son in a psych treatment program at a hospital, and the psychiatrist there, this was after 7 years of parenting. The psychiatrist told me that at the end of our sessions, if I would hold his hands and look into his eyes and let him share with me what his day had been, that would be really helpful for our bonding. And I was just like,
yeah,
are you kidding me?
Yeah. Well, and also I think a therapist that says, well, I can help you in this area or I can't. If a therapist says in an outpatient basis that, I'll fix this, and in fact, I'll see your child individually. You don't have to. You need to move on because the disorder is a disorder that's manifested in the context of family and relationships. So individual therapy with these kids right off the bat to assess them and things like that usually is the wrong way to go.
Right. And I think that's very important because a lot of parents, by the time they're seeking help for this and understand how severe it is, they're pretty enmeshed with this whole thing. And it's a tough road. And a lot of times they want to take somebody and have somebody fix the kid. It's like, please, let me drop them off and have them. And really, that's not going to work.
Well, I call that just an hour babysitting.
Right. And it's expensive babysitting.
And it actually makes kids worse because a child with attachment disorder, if they go in with a therapist, they see that therapist as powerful, that can help me with my cause. And so a lot of times with traditional therapists that don't understand the disorder and they see the child individually, because what they're trying to do is establish a trusting relationship with their client. And out of that trusting relationship, you empower your client to change their behaviors and things like that. Well, the problem with that thinking is that that's what these kids want. So if mom is in the waiting room, is angry, frustrated, depressed, or whatever, and they're seeing this child, that child says, wow, mom's in the waiting room. I know this therapist saw how angry and short mom is, so now I'm going to embellish that. So then you say, well, Mr. and Miss Therapist, did you see how angry my mom is out there?
I'm trying so hard.
I'm trying so hard, but I can't because she's mad at me all the time. Now this therapist is feeling pretty good about it, him or or herself and walks out saying, okay, Mom, can I see you? Have you considered parenting, antidepressants, and anger management? I mean, so now the child, and then the child steps back and sees that and goes, ha, I'm winning. I have this therapist on my side.
And just to enforce one more time, this child is not evil. This
No.
child is not
It's in
plotting
survival mode.
yeah, they're not thinking, how can I take Mom down just for the sake of taking Mom down. It's, I am so terrified of trust, of vulnerability, that I'm going to do anything I have to do to stay alive. And Mom is the one who is getting close on something here.
Right.
So I'm going to have to push back with everything
Right.
I've got. So it's not just I'm this psychopathic, crazy person who's doing everything I can to destroy another human being. It's I'm trying to survive. And they don't have the tools or the skills or anything to be able to make it. So I want to clarify that these kids are not just evil human beings.
Well, and I think the other part of that is if you have a parent that has their own childhood wounds or triggers, the child is a good diagnostician. They will expose whatever that is you're trying to, to hide.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, yeah, there's several. I mean, one is that, maybe Mom grew up with an angry, controlling mother herself. Okay. And so what she's trying to do is to make the child happy, to make her feel good and feel secure as a mom because her mother made her feel less than growing up. So in her adaptation is, if I please my child and make them happy and all that, I'll prove to myself that I'm an okay person.
Right.
Well, so then when that child doesn't respond that way, then Mom's wound will come up to the forefront and now becomes the yelling, controlling mom that they never wanted to be. And so I call it a gift in a strange package. Is that so when you see this happening, I want to know what that parent grew up around, what was their triggers, how they were, so that I'll say to a parent, we've got to work on your buttons because your child's finding it every time. And then you're both losing in relationship.
Right. And it doesn't feel good to the mom either. I mean,
Right.
it feels absolutely horrible. Now she feels like a failure as a mother, as a human, all of that. And all the old wounds start screaming out again. So you're getting it from all sides.
Well, and your marriage can be suffering too,
Right.
that, your spouse doesn't see the same thing. And so now you have less patience. You're not as close. You're more angry.
Right.
It's more edgy with other people in the family. The other kids in the family are seeing it as well.
Right. So where do parents start? What's a good rule of thumb? I mean, we were talking a little bit just off camera about how it's really not helpful to just try to offer solutions to circumstantial problems that many of these families are facing. Why is that? Why can't we just offer pat answers?
Well, I mean, if we think about, an intervention with a child, whether it's lying, you can have an intervention just around that, but it's the whole picture of the relationship that's important. A therapist should be working on the relationship between the child and the parents. And if that relationship gets repaired, in a healthy way, then children give up control because they can feel more vulnerable. They can trust a parent. And so that's what it's about. It's not about getting this child to, understand. It's about how do you work on the family relationships.
Right. And so all these behaviors, they're symptoms. They're not the issue.
Right.
Yet parents get so tired of the lying,
Right.
or they get so tired of the manipulating and the lack of empathy and, the screw you world attitude. They get so tired of that. And so they want to do something to stop those behaviors.
Right.
But that's not the way to go.
Well, and even to have respite, to have, the opportunity for the child to be with someone that really understands so that, the couple can enjoy each other.
Right.
That's gold. I mean, they look for that. The problem is that, oftentimes when they take their child over to, grandma and grandpa's house, they get spoiled and they go out and have a good time. But when they get back, that child wants to go back to grandma and grandpa to be spoiled. So they act out more.
Right.
And so just having a team around them that knows knows this child and knows how to be with this child.
Well, and the respite, I think, has to be long enough and frequent enough
Right.
that the parent, even if they know they're going to get a little backlash when they come home, they know another one's coming. You know, if you only do this once a year and you're gone for a week and then the kid makes you pay for it for another week, it almost feels not worth it.
Right.
But if you know that you get to be gone for a weekend once a month and a couple of evenings throughout that month, you know, something like that you could say, okay, well, I know I'm going to get it for a day after, but I've got another one coming, so it's okay.
Yeah. Well, and that's why moms especially feel like a prisoner in their own home, because other people understand. They don't want their child eventually, so they just end up being survivors along with a survivor that they are raising.
So what are some things people should look for? You talked about if you're talking to a counselor on the phone, you need to know that they can understand what it is that you're living with.
Right.
What types of therapy do help with these kids?
Well, I mean, we do family therapy. All of our sessions are family driven. So we're working with the child and the parents together. So I'll meet with the parents and we'll talk about the symptoms and what's going on, and then we'll come up with a strategy. And the strategy is always how to make a connection with the child's true feelings under their behavior. We might do crosstalk. I mean, there's all kinds of strategies therapists that work with these kind of kids, can have up their sleeve. But it is all about how do you help kids connect to their feelings that's underneath their behavior, empathize with their struggle and what happened to them when they were little. So you get them cognitively and emotionally to connect with their own wound, because if they don't have a buy-in, they don't have a feeling of being safe and connected in some way to the process, they keep pushing
They're not
back
going to
and
go there.
manipulating.
Yeah. So what do you do with the kids that just won't go there? So
Well,
you're trying all of this work and they will not get vulnerable, and there's nothing that you have tried or done, and the parents are at their end. What can you do
again,
then?
I go back to the assessment. If a child is coming out in the moderate to severe range of attachment disorder, usually outpatient therapy won't work. For all the years I've been doing this, the most ethical thing I can say to a family is that I cannot help your child give up control because I only see them once or twice a week. And so that just doesn't even touch it. They regroup after the session. When you even tap into some vulnerability, they'll regroup. Okay, I'm not going down that path.
So they
again.
build up
so
even
they build
more
up another
defenses.
defense.
Yeah.
To resist.
So this
that
can actually
vulnerability.
make them worse.
Yes, it can make them worse because a therapist that tapped into a feeling of fear or sadness about letting a mom be in control, that scares them to the point where they're going to figure out another way around that. They're not going to go down that. So they might treat mom really worse after a session than better because mom took them to this therapist that tapped into that vulnerability. So again, it comes on severity. So if a child is not in the disorder range but has attachment or trust issues,
Right.
it's on a lower end,
Right.
then the outpatient work
So there's
can
been
work.
some trauma and they struggle with trust, but they can get vulnerable here and there.
Right.
Those are the kids that you can work with in outpatient type therapy with their families.
Right.
The ones that are more moderate to severe, you're saying not outpatient. What's the option?
Well, and that's why we have our program designed based out of understanding this, where we have professional treatment families that have been in the shoes of the parents we're working with. And so they're able to...
So these are former parents
Yes.
of reactive disordered
most of them right?
children. Okay.
Where they've been in their shoes and they've gotten the help and the understanding, so they can become partners in the process of recovery, because these are parents that walk the walk, talk the talk, and understand it. Plus the fact that they're more objective. They don't have a relationship built up where they get triggered about the
Right.
behaviors.
Right.
And they can be more empathic parents.
Right.
Empathic parents with the same containment or control that you would do with a toddler. And kids are able to give up control better in those environments because they can't manipulate and control. They can't give away their conflict to anyone. And so you're able to get to their vulnerability.
So the things that a mother who's been living in this situation for a couple of years or whatever, they're getting so frustrated and angry and scared and all of those type of things. When this, so the child does it, the mom gets triggered, which then kind of re-triggers the child again. When they go to these attachment families, the parents just don't get triggered.
Right.
And so the child can act this way, but the parent doesn't respond.
Right. Well, they're not responding with anger or, push
Right.
back.
It's
and
not like
things
they ignore
that.
them.
Right.
They respond with compassion and empathy.
Yeah. And
What might that look like?
well, like, for example, a child that uses, foul language, and then mom reacts because she grew up around, you don't ever talk that way. You don't ever swear. You get, then you get hit or your mouth washed, whatever the strategy was there. So they would go in a treatment home and they would pull out the same kind of distancing behaviors to get these treatment parents to back up. So they might say to the mom, oh, I hate you, you effing S, whatever, whatever foul language. And then that treatment mom is able to say, sounds like you're pretty angry at me. The good news is, sweetheart, you get to spend more time with me to learn how to respect and love a mom. I look forward to it. Now, if you think about that, the child now walks away more confused rather than more angry because they weren't able to make that parent mad, say, go to your room forever,
Right.
which is a parent will say, go to your room or you're grounded for a month. Well, we don't time kids out, we time kids in.
Right.
So when they act out more, they spend more time around a parent because they have
Right.
to learn
Oh,
about
good. You get to come
relationship.
sit by me and read a book. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a lot of paradoxical kind of parenting because it's not the regular response that these kids are getting in their home environment. So you remove them from that and you're able to, and we already have all the script of the symptoms and what they do, so we're already prepared.
Yeah, and they're not that unique. I mean, it
Yeah.
seems very bizarre to people who don't understand this disorder, but for people who live within this, there's not much you can do that we haven't heard of.
Exactly. I mean, kids will use their feces and urine, whatever to get people to throw them away and back off. So we've seen it all, seen every behavior. And it's not that our parents don't get frustrated, but they're able to step back from it. They're able
Right.
to,
Well, and don't you typically have like a husband-wife or something so that if one of them starts to get frustrated, the other one can kind of step in and they can tag team a little bit so that they don't get so worn out?
Exactly.
But these children actually move into their home.
Yeah, or on an outpatient basis, if they're not severe, we might just do therapeutic weekends, things like that. You're able to know how much a child is able to give up and how much they're not able to.
Okay.
And it gives people a break. And then in therapy, you're able to talk with the parents more about their symptoms and their triggers with the child not there.
Right. So they're not in that hyper-aroused state. They can kind of calm down and they can start to feel safe and cared for in the stress that they're living with. So they're not feeling attacked like, oh, you're a horrible mother because you respond when your kid
Right.
does this. You can say to them, I totally get why you would feel
you
this way.
normalize their response based out of what the child's doing and what they experience. And for another parent to say, I've been there, done that, that was me too. And then people are, oh, good, there's people that understand.
There's hope out there.
The other thing is that, just the psychiatrist, our psychiatrist has learned along with us and so is able to really help a child if they medically need an intervention. And so that is helpful because then a parent comes in and that psychiatrist is saying, oh, I understand, this is what it's about,
Right,
this is
right.
why, and things like that. So the whole team around the family.
Well, and you're not starting over every time. I think that's the thing that a lot of these families, you go to a new psychiatrist and you have a whole history thing again, and you've got to explain the whole thing again. And then they may not even understand reactive attachment disorder, so they're being diagnosed with all different kinds of things and
Right.
medicated for things that they don't need medication for. You guys already have the attachment piece taken care of, so the psychiatrist steps in
Right.
and deals with whatever else is going on that
They're
is
part of the team approach.
Right.
And if you think of it as a developmental disorder of a toddler, what do you do with toddlers? Everybody is around that child developmentally to keep them safe and are reacting
Walling
to
them in safely.
Yeah, and discipline, control equals love and nurture. That's what little kids need. They need to be pulled in and kept safe.
Right.
So if they can manipulate and control you and give away their conflict, they don't feel safe with you.
Right. Absolutely. Well, thank you. This has been so informational. I mean, there's so much going on here that I'm thinking of more and more and more questions. And I know people who are listening may be thinking of more questions as well. And what I'd like to encourage you to do, like we said, we're not going to necessarily address specific circumstantial issues about what do you do if your child is lying. But we would love to be able to address other questions that you may have around this topic. So at the bottom of the video, under the comments section on YouTube, go ahead and put your questions, and we'll meet again and we'll try to answer some of these questions and see if we can't help some of you that really feel like you're just desperate and alone, because I definitely know that feeling, and a whole lot of parents who know that feeling.
Yes.
And we'd like to provide some hope and help and healing in whatever way we can in this format. So Thank you again.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it so much, and we'll see you again next time on Broken and Brilliant.